Welcome back to the Profit Builder Unscripted. You are in for a treat today. My guest, Bill Darrah, who is a very successful general contractor, shares a hard lesson that he learned in his business early on that completely transformed how he ran his business and his experience of it. All right, let's jump in. Well, today's guest is an amazing contractor and now coach, Bill Darrah, and I cannot wait for us to jump in and have our conversation about what is an event that happened in Bill's life that changed him as a business owner and as a human being. And Bill, before we jump into all of that, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a guest. And
Very welcome.
would you just tell people a little bit about you and your journey and your history, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Okay. Well, thank you, Vicky. It's a pleasure being here and after working with you for so many years and being such a integral part of my success as a contractor. So thank you for that. And thank you for having me here just to share a little bit about my journey. Um, for the people that don't know, most don't, I was a general contractor in Hawaii on the island of Maui for about 25 years. And found myself in the high-end um, space with custom homes and high-end remodeling, and really had a fantastic career. I retired from that and started a consulting business on helping other um, men doing the same thing, men and women doing the same thing. And I've really enjoyed that transition. And this is a great opportunity for me to share some of the stories and some of the war stories that
Mhm.
and things that have happened along the way. But yeah, I had a smallish company. We did have a an office and project managers, estimators, office manager, and then project managers in the field, and anywhere from 35 to on the slow times, 5 to 8 employees, depending on what was happening in the economy. And um, but yeah, I just wrapped up my business just a couple years ago now, and moved from Maui, Hawaii, after living there for 35 years to move to Bend, Oregon, where I'm at now. And my wife and I, we love it here, and we're enjoying the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and a
Nice,
little about
nice.
our story.
Yeah, thank you. I love that you're taking that 25 years of learning and growing and creating a really great contracting business while you were in Maui, and that you're now helping other contractors in developing and growing and coaching them and in learning the lessons in the road to success as a contractor, because it's bumpy, right? It's like this is not a, I don't think that contracting is an easy business to be in. And especially because so many people start in this business and in this industry with, hey, I've got this skill, I got this talent, I've got this thing that I love to do. And then they go hang their shingle as a contractor. And like many of us, most of us who go start a business, you go from being an expert at something to now all of a sudden I'm wearing these hats that I'm not good at, that I don't know anything about, and having to learn and having to go through those and have those growing pains. And you've done that and you did that. And I love that you're now sharing that experience with other people, which brings us to your story. As you shared, you and I worked together for several years, and there's a story that I know that you want to share about a project that you worked on that really changed you in a big way. And for those people who are listening, before I ask Bill to share that story and talk about it, the reason I've asked you to be a guest and the reason that I think it's important to share our stories is we sometimes, well, I think oftentimes we like look at other people and we look at what they've done, or we've looked at how they run their business, and we're like, boy, they got it all figured out. They're like, they must know something better than I do, or they're better than me at doing this or that or the other thing. And if only. And I think that it's really helpful for us to know that, we've all had to learn and grow. And sometimes it's out of the biggest breakdowns and challenges that we've faced that we have learned our greatest lessons. And I think that's just true about life in general, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree to that? Like I feel like some of my greatest skills have come from some of my greatest mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
agree more. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're forced to deal with this issue now.
Right.
Um,
Right. So
and
they're really blessings, right, in
yeah, yeah,
disguise,
yeah.
framed as breakdowns or challenges or problems. And I want to, I'm asking, why I love having this conversation with you today is that I think other people hearing our stories and our journeys can help them, A, feel not so alone, and B, to know that, to learn and to grow and to be able to maybe take those learnings that you've had and apply them for themselves, or maybe it's a solution to a problem. And again, overarching is we're not alone. Like we so much of the time have some shared journey that we're on. And the
Yeah,
more we can feel not alone, I think that it helps us sort of move beyond that we somehow think we're flawed or not good enough or, any of that, which is just really not true.
right.
That it's all just about learning and growing and moving forward. So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
share, if you will, Bill, like what's that event that happened in your life that changed you as a business owner and as a person in some really positive way on the other side of it? What was that event for you?
Well, it was a really difficult client that I had. And we've all had them at different times and different levels of difficulty. But when I started writing some notes down and thoughts about uh, sharing this story, the thing that came to mind was fix the issue now. That was the title of my thoughts is and what came out of this issue that I had with this client. The first issue that I had with this client was them starting to kind of poke holes into our construction contract after we had been under contract and started moving through the project, and we were well underway, and started interpreting my contract significantly different than it was intended in the way that I had written the contract. And I had spent up till that time quite a bit of time and money on creating that contract. And I thought that I really understood it. And so it was very personal to me because I had really worked with various attorneys over the years as I evolved my construction contract. And this particular contract was a time and material contract. And this was for a very wealthy person. And they were very familiar with dealing with contracts and very familiar with dealing with attorneys as well. And they were looking for ways essentially to poke holes into my contract. And I first of all was personally very offended by that. So that was something that I kind of had to get over. But what I realized is that I needed to stop everything that I was doing immediately and fix this problem with my contract. Because even if I thought that my contract was good and fair and right, they obviously either didn't care or just had an angle that they were trying to come at me. And I knew that we could solve this problem by redrafting and being more clear and very specific about some of the issues around the way that we do our billing and the way that labor is billed and things like that. And so I literally just told my whole team in the office, we have to stop everything right now and hyper focus on this because we had a couple of other contracts that we were negotiating that were coming up very soon. And I just knew we couldn't get ourselves in the same situation where someone else is interpreting our contract differently than what our intention was. And so we did that. And I just feel like for me in business, I've learned along the way that when these things come up like this, whether it's an issue with an employee or an issue with a client, a contract, an estimate, whatever it might be, um, to address that issue right now and to not delay because it's top of mind, your focus, you're maybe emotionally connected to it, whatever it is. If we put it on the side, we put it on a to-do list for some other time, I think the vigor and the energy that you have about that issue kind of goes away, and you may never come back to it actually, because there's so many other fires that you're fighting along the way.
Yeah, yeah. I think you make a really valid point, which is, yeah, that whole thing of I adding it to the to-do list of things to do. But here's what's interesting is as I'm listening to you, I'm like, all right, you were faced with a situation where you had somebody who obviously had super deep pockets, who was poking holes into your contract. And I'm guessing that what you were also facing at that point was the potential of losing money, not getting paid, having somebody challenge how much you were charging because there were elements of your contract that were not solid, that put you in a situation where you were taking on risk and liability, potential risk and liability. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And as I said, this particular contract was a T&M contract, and um,
Can we talk
when
about that for just a second?
yeah,
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 because um, I know you and I talked earlier. It's like I know this story. I know, you and I were having lots of conversations during when this project was going on. And I think so many times that people get into a situation where they have a T&M contract and they go, well, it's pretty straightforward. It's time and materials, and I'm going to charge you at that. And I know you have another part of this story that relates to that whole like um, mentality of it's kind of an open checkbook. It's all good, right? Like they
right,
wanted to take advantage of if it took less time and I don't have to have as much risk in it, that we think that time and material contracts are a little more risk-free, I guess is really the point I'm making here.
right,
And
right.
without as much potential liability, but there's a point that you're making here too. And again, I know there's another part to this whole story about a time and material contract. What would you like, when you think about this whole concept of time material contracts, they're a little bit more risk free. What would you say to people about that? And how did your thinking shift at that point in not only how you had your contract written, but like how did your contract change and how did your thinking change and then your contract change? And you don't have to go into all the details of the contract, but sort of the essence of like what was it that shifted besides just going, I can't wait. Like that's a risk, but maybe you can
Yeah.
just speak to that for a second.
I think what I really saw was that every client, whether they're rich or poor, whatever their station is, they want to know how much. And they want to know how much as soon as you can possibly tell them how much. And and sometimes it might be before you send them a bill. It might be some way of estimating what the how much may be. So introducing some other systems into the process to help with even in a T&M project where you hopefully at least have a budget or some idea to a benchmark to start from, you are adding to that budgetary figure as you go as things change. We commonly call that a change order, typically in a fixed bid type of situation. But what I realized quickly in this particular project was that there were so many changes happening. It was like drinking from a fire hose.
Mm.
The amount of changes was just unbelievable. And so to monetize that, to we needed to come up with a system because we just didn't have one, that we could keep up with that volume on a big project. And so I had to implement a system. We called it estimate updates rather than change orders because we're updating the cost of our estimate, not a fixed bid. So going forward from this project, I essentially treated every T&M project like a fixed bid project. I always did estimate updates, AKA change orders, and that would help me and the client incrementally as we went through the project raise the budget typically. Sometimes it would go down, and if things changed to the negative side, typically it would go up as the clients would change from one size of a door to a bigger door, whatever it might be. And so it sounds like a simple change, but if you don't have a really robust change order system, um, especially with the T&M thing, the T&M type of contract, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And I think there is a little bit, I think, of a misunderstanding with people, like you said, Vicky, that the T&M contract is less risky
Mhm.
for a contractor. And I really think of it as like a lazy man's contract if it's not administered properly. So I tell my clients that I coach, like, yeah, we can do T&M, but this isn't an open checkbook. And you have a responsibility to communicate very detailed with your clients exactly what you estimate it to be, and then to update it at some frequency,
So let me
whatever
ask you,
you decide that to be.
let me ask you a question. Do you
Yeah.
think that how your lack of tight controls over how you were doing those change orders or revisions to estimate, is that what you're revisions to
Mhm.
estimate is what you called them? So do you think that that really precipitated the attorney coming in? Like you had a client who was kind of unhappy in the, and then they start poking holes at your contract. Do you think that the whole lack of clear communication with the client and them, like you like sort of slowing down the process and going, wait, like we're gonna talk about what's the impact before you start throwing the next thing and the next thing. Like we need to like have we need to like my recollection of this situation with you is that you had to shift from being reacting to the situation to you being like going, gotta be the head of this dog. I can't be the tail of it anymore. Like you going, I gotta get in front of this and realizing that you had a client who was unhappy with how that communication was happening about revisions to scope or revisions to contract. And then secondarily, they then got their attorney on you about that. Like, would you say that that's true? And like, what was well, first of all, would you say that that's true?
Well, that's true, but I think what really probably got them really upset was that be, because I didn't have this system implemented from the beginning. Let's say we were 30 or 40% through the project, and I was creating change orders, let's call them, estimate updates is what I call them,
Mhm.
retroactively for work we had already done. And then I was also
Okay.
created them for work that we were going to do. So when the sum of all those came together and were sort of dumped on their plate, like, hey, this is the project that you've now created, and this is probably about what it's going to cost. It was such a shock to them. It was, you know, I don't know, 70 change orders, something like that we created. and then dumped on their lap at one time. I mean, that's a bad idea. Like, who's not going to be shocked by that?
Okay.
Um, but if I think if we had had this system already and we had started from the very beginning and we showed them how this worked, and when the first big change came, we said, okay, well, this is how this affects the budget. Okay, change order number two, this is how, and going on, then you're sort of teaching your client how the process
Yes.
works.
Yes, yes, yes,
And
yes, yes,
and
right.
and,
That's
and
so important. Yeah.
yeah, instead of just dumping a new process on them halfway through the project, they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then they maybe have lost faith in you, and so I think that's sort of what happened to us is we were doing a good job on the project. There's no issues with quality. We were working night and day because it was a tight deadline. All those things were being met, but
Mm.
it didn't come down to the workmanship. It came down to the fact that I was a little bit loosey goosey with the T&M idea, like you discussed. They've got money. They just want it done. Let's just hurry up and get it done. But let's slow down a minute because they also want to know how much. And they want to know as soon as you know how much. And you have to develop a system that enables you to communicate that with them on some kind of regular basis, whether it's weekly, monthly, whatever that might be. And that's what we through this process started to develop, and it completely changed the way I did business. I never had a single problem of this kind relating to the financial aspect of a project after I implemented these systems of essentially communicating about the money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's another little nuance in there, Vicky, too, that I for some reason I developed this angst about communicating about the money.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to finally just get over it and
Yeah.
say, here's the bad news. Here it is. Let's put on our big boy pants, Bill, and give them the bad news, if there is bad news,
Oh
whatever
gosh.
good news. And that was a big aha moment for me is you can't ignore these things. Everybody wants to know about the money,
Yeah.
maybe more than the sheen of the paint
Yeah.
or the color of the floor. They want
Yeah.
to know about the money.
I'm so glad you've said this because I think like the whole thing that you just said a second ago about like the whole like we were doing beautiful high quality work. And so many times when I see contractors get themselves into a bind, it's for the stuff that you just said. It's for I didn't communicate clearly enough, often enough about the dollars and cents of it. And it is that fear of like, I don't want to have to say bad news, I don't want to have to be the bearer of bad news,
Right,
and like I'm double downing on customer service and high quality and meeting the deadlines. Like I know you like double down on all of that and did
right,
beautiful work. And I see that all the time with people where that fear of having those hard conversations early and often get us in situations where you end up in these breakdowns, and sometimes fairly significant breakdowns. And then you end up losing money on projects, right? You end up having to give
right,
back dollars, or you end up with an attorney who's going for
right.
your throat about your contract because they're like, wait, like yeah. So talk to us about, I love this. Because I just think I like this is stuff that people like, this is real stuff that challenges contractors every day. Um, so talk about the part about you never had that happen again. So just walk us through like what is it that you changed? And besides like the whole Bill, you got to put on your big boy pants and have the hard conversation. How did you approach that differently? So maybe you can just speak to both parts of that.
So, how I dealt with it differently. So, on the contract side, I literally, revamped my contract, was very specific about, the the nuts and bolts part of the contract that deal with billing and invoicing and frequency and those kind of things. Not the boilerplate part, the insurance and all that, but it was more, what the billing rate is and what that includes and doesn't include. Just be very, very specific about that. And that then I also every contract going forward, I would literally sit down with the client and read
Yes.
through there with them the contract, not just sending it to them in an email. We would do that, of course, but on the day of signing, I would personally try and, if possible, I would sit down with them and read through that because I wanted them to really understand and explain these pieces to them so that there's no misunderstanding about the contract. So that was an important
That's
thing that I
brilliant.
added to my process. And then, something that I added to the communication part. I didn't think we would bring this into today's discussion, but I started doing a weekly report, Vicky, and we always did our billings every 2 weeks. But in addition to that, every Friday I sent out a weekly report to my clients. And whether I had one project or five projects, whether they were big or small, I sent out a report. And I may have sent 15 emails during the week as well. But this report was a summary, an executive summary of the entire project, including all the financials. Every change order is listed. And so this was my effort to remind them these were the changes. These are the dollars that we've discussed numerous times. You can't come back to me at any point and say, I didn't know
Hmm.
you'd ever told me. I'm telling you every week, I'm reminding you of your deadlines and I'm reminding you of the financial side.
Love that.
And and it was quite a burden to bear because for me personally, I put that line in the sand and I said,
Hmm.
I'm committed to doing this every week. And we've talked about this. I travel. And so I'm all over the place. That's my hobby. And it was then and it is now. But wherever I was on vacation, in foreign countries, I'm writing that report and it's going out on Friday. Um, and
So
it
you
was
put that
just
stake in the ground about, oh, here's what I
communicating.
love. Like you made a commitment and you said, client, here's what's going to happen, and it's going to happen every Friday. So by putting that stake in the ground and saying publicly, this is what's going to happen, and doing it, that you put yourself on the hook for it. And you
I
built
did.
that muscle memory too about this is how we run projects. It's not like this is an ad thing. This is like a fun, as I'm listening, right? Like it's a
Mhm.
fundamental way of how you ran projects.
A little bit of a nuance to that, though. I actually never told my clients that this was going to happen. It
Oh,
just
okay.
started happening. They just every Friday started receiving this report. Um, the stake in the sand was with myself, holding
Okay.
myself accountable, um, which is very important to me. Um, to be a man of your word, to follow through, to have consistency, and then, I'm blind copying everybody on my team. So everybody on my team knows, oh yeah, Bill is consistent. He does this week
Oh,
in
I
and
love that.
week out, year in and year out. This always happens no matter what. If he's sick, if he's traveling, he's communicating with his clients. This is a really important value about communicating about the schedule, the budget, upcoming changes, whatever it might be. So that communication piece, I think that was also a big piece, not only the contracts, the estimate updates, but then the continual communication throughout the project,
Yeah.
on a consistent basis. And it may not have to be every week, but But
For
that's what
you,
I
it has.
chose.
Yeah.
And for me, it helped me in a lot of other ways too.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but one of the things I listened to is blind copying your team that was teaching them something, right? That was
Sure
teaching them
was. Yeah.
something about communication, about consistency, about reliability, about keeping your word, about doing what you say you're going to do, about
Yeah.
like having professional practices that I don't want to miss that point that you're talking about right now, because I think that as leaders, our ability to be able to transform our teams around us to people who take ownership, who produce consistent results, they demonstrate how we behave. And if we say we're going to meet with you every Thursday to an employee, but then only show up half the time, they think, well, that's how we do business. That's how we function as, as employees, as leaders, as people, as human beings. Like, so I think that what a great opportunity you took to teach your team what it means to be professional, what it means to be consistent, what it means to follow through, what it means to keep your word, and so on. I think that's awesome. Do you think that and I want to hear about other lessons you learned in that, but one of the thoughts that keeps occurring to me is, when you were talking about that thing about having hard conversations and put on your big boy pants and be willing to go talk about the money, do you think that you doing this every Friday helped you have a greater sense of clarity so that you had more confidence to have those conversations?
Yeah. It absolutely did. And I was just telling the facts. It wasn't, yeah, it was just easier for me having that weekly report to, oh, there's this new update to the estimate. Oh, there's this new schedule thing. And by having that solidified every week, yeah, I think it emboldened me and it made it easier to have those hard conversations if they occurred. But what really it prevented a lot of those hard conversations because I didn't
Mm,
need to have them. They had the information. I
hmm.
was giving it to them on a regular basis, and maybe we would have little conversations about the one estimate update on the cabinets or whatever it might be, but it wasn't like some big global breakdown because they have been slowly, incrementally seeing the project develop both in that report. I would send project photos, of course. So they're watching this happen and they're watching the numbers change um, as you're going down the line. And I just there's something really profound about that. And I think there's also something I don't think I necessarily did it on purpose, Vicky, but there's something too about providing somebody with a service that exceeds your what you're selling. So I never sold that they were going to get this weekly report with pictures and the whole thing, but they got it anyway. And a lot of times, I a lot of clients wouldn't say anything about it, but some clients would be like every Saturday morning we would sit out on the lanai and we would drink our coffee and we would look at the project report and we would look at the pictures and look at everything and thank you so much. So that was probably about half the time. But it didn't matter if they didn't care or want the report, I'm still sending it because what it did for me. Um, One of the nuances was the report. Also, I always looked at the schedule, so I had a Gantt chart schedule for each of my projects, and so that would trigger every Friday afternoon. I'm going to look at the schedule and I'm going to update the schedule if I needed to, and I'd put that information into the report. So it held me accountable to doing these things that, in the middle of the maelstrom of running your business, you might not do because you've got so many other fires to put out. But if you've organized this report in a way where you check these boxes, okay, I've looked at the finances, I've looked at the schedule, here's the picture, here's the 5 things that I'm holding myself accountable to provide. um, and then you doing it repeatedly, it just builds credibility.
Hmm.
So anyway, that was a I think that was a big turning point for me
Hmm.
and
I
a lot
love
of
that.
work.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think it, because I get the lot of work part. I mean, I would imagine that there's people who are listening to this or watching this who are like, whew, that would be a lot of work. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, man, it's that whole thing of like lifting up your eyes, looking out, being at 30,000 feet and going, where am I headed? And doing it early and often, in my experience, when you can see where you're headed before you get there, avoids problems, avoids breakdowns, and lets you have more control over outcomes. Is how I think about like that whole process of whether it's 2 week look aheads or, looking up once a week, re-looking at your schedule, dollars and cents, all that. So can you just like, did you find that when you had that like solidly in place, do you think that in the long run it took you less time or more time?
Oh, definitely less time. Yeah, as I developed that system, I'm always been about efficiency. So that report, it grew and changed and morphed not only as the job went along, but as my career went along. And I decided, what to add and what to delete. And but I tried to refine it in a way that I could knock it out, that it wasn't an all day deal. It
Mhm.
started out as an all day deal to try and put all that information together. And of course, I'm checking my finances against our accounting system to make sure that they're saying the same thing. And um, so, but I got better and better at it. I refined that system, and just using simple tools. I mean, I basically did it all through Google Documents and Google Sheets, but I created a really pretty quick system. Um, I think I got it down, roughly an hour project on Friday per job.
Yeah.
Um, and so that might sound like a lot, but to me, it was the best insurance against catastrophic failure was to pay that, hour per week per job saved so many issues down the road. So,
So how did changing the contract, changing your communication style, staying on top of the numbers, how did and that weekly communication with clients and the schedule and how did that impact your business and your life?
well, it was much more peaceful. I feel like um, when you're afraid of talking about the numbers, it's almost like the numbers, but you're afraid to talk about the numbers. So it's like you're hiding something, even though you're not. But it just kind of you have there's this tension,
Yeah.
um, and so that goes away. So for me, it was just such a peaceful thing when I hit the send button on Friday. I was done. I could, I was done for the week, and I know I had communicated with my clients. My team was all set. They knew, the 2 week look ahead is part of that project, the scheduled weekly report. So they would know what the expectation is for what's coming up, and so it had a calming effect on me personally. I knew it because I always did it at the end of the week. And so that just kind of wrapped up the week, and it just had I'd say a calming effect for me.
Nice.
That's
How
the
did it affect
best
the
way I can describe
profitability
it.
of your business?
Well, we never had to litigate again, so that's that helped tremendously. Yeah, that was but I would say that it really helped my profitability because I was now more focused on the numbers than I had been before. I was, previously I was working in the business, not on the business, as we like to say. And so this was me working one of the systems of working on the business is refining this report and refining the contracts and those things. So I found the more I did that, the less issues I had with clients, the less tension that I had with the clients. And of course, I had an unbelievable team in the field, so some of the best you could ask for. And a guy eventually from my company took over my company and is running it now, and rebranded, and he's just doing amazing work on Maui. I'm so proud of that. He's just a fantastic guy.
Nice.
Um, but so to be able to have somebody that was above excellence in the field, and then I'm trying to be excellent on the admin side, those, coupling those together keeps you out of litigation. And now you can just focus on doing amazing projects, and you're not so worried about, all of the what ifs. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's always stuff that comes up, but you can really mitigate that by having these good systems in place. Yeah.
Nice. Bill, I love our conversations. I love talking with you. And I so appreciate you sharing this story and sharing your experience. I just think that you have touched on so many things like that affect contractors' lives day in and day out. Those things that cause angst and worry and concern or make them lose money and just I really appreciate the whole mindset shift that you're talking about having, and that mind shift change caused you to change certain things, but it came out of this really not fun situation with this client that again, like, so many times that's where our greatest learning or our greatest gifts come from, is when we learn from those things. So yeah, so thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah.
And if people wanted to get a hold of you, before I do that, I have a couple of rapid fire questions to ask you.
Oh, okay.
So before we do the rapid fire questions, is there any final thoughts that you have about what you want to share with people? Yeah, just any other final thoughts about all of this that you feel is important?
Yeah, I do. I feel that, the point that I really want to press here is that it's easy when you have a conflict with a client to point the finger at the client. They're a bad person, or they have issues, or whatever it might be. But to turn the finger back at yourself and say, what did I bring to this relationship that has caused or contributed to this problem? And for me, that in this situation that we talked about, it was a contract that wasn't as good as I thought it was, and a process that just frankly didn't exist. And that was on me. That wasn't my client's fault. That was on me, and I needed to fix the problem. So it's like I said, it's easy to play the victim, and we all feel like someone's trying to take advantage of us. But you were part of that, probably, that allowed that situation to occur by not having maybe something in play that you really needed to. So I think that was kind of summarizes it, is to really
Yeah,
look at yourself and your own internal systems to make sure that you weren't maybe the cause of the problem.
yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I think that when we are willing to take 100% responsibility for 100% of the time, and responsibility by definition is just the ability to respond, that when we're willing to come from that place, it gets us out of the mode of what you just said of like being a victim, right? And that when we can hold ourselves in that place of, all right, what do I have to learn? Where can I grow from this? What could I do differently? Like that ability to respond, to have something happen differently, it gets us out of being at effect of somebody else and lets us have more control over our future destiny. Like, who do we want to be? What do we want to create? Yeah, so thanks for saying that. I think it's really important. So yeah, nice distinction. Thank you. All right, you ready for rapid fire questions?
Okay, fire
All
away.
right. What's your favorite personal book or podcast?
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Okay, podcast. Yeah, awesome. What's your favorite business book or podcast?
Probably, it's gosh, I've read so many. Um,
Maybe like what's just a recent one that you've enjoyed, business book or podcast that you listen to?
you know, I I I hate to say that it's as simple as How to Win Friends. What is the
How to Win Friends and Influence People?
yeah, I mean, it's just such an old standard, but my gosh, there's just so many good lessons in that book.
Totally.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
I feel caught a little flat-footed on that, but because there's so many great ones.
that's
But
good. That's great. I think
yours
it's a
is
great book.
fantastic,
And you
I
know
will
what?
say.
Sometimes those old classics, they just live on and on. There's just wisdom in them. So I don't care if it's
Yeah,
old. Yeah, it's still
yeah,
good.
yeah.
What's your favorite food or meal?
My favorite food or meal is, recently I have I eat a lot of meat nowadays, which is a big change for me. And I found this restaurant near here that has this bone marrow appetizer that I would have never in my wildest dreams thought that that would be good, but it is so good. My body says more of that, please, when I eat it. So,
Nice.
um,
High
yeah,
protein too.
a good ribeye and some bone marrow, I guess.
All right. All right. A true carnivore. Um,
Yeah,
what are you grateful for right now in your life?
my health. Yeah, my health. I'm so grateful that my body is holding up, and I have to be very careful, and I have been with how I treat it, with what I feed it, and the amount of exercise and sunlight that I get. But yeah, I think I'm so grateful for my health because yeah, I see so many people about my age are just really starting to decline, and I'm really making a goal of trying to push that down the road as far as possible. So,
Nice. Nice. All right. So how can the Profit Builder Unscripted listeners find you and get hold of you?
I have a website. You can start there, and you can see a little bit about me on my website. It's www.pointbadvisory.com. And you can email me at bill@pointbadvisory.com. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody about their business and see if I can help you in
Awesome.
any way.
Awesome. Bill, thank you. So appreciate you. I so appreciate our conversations. If
Likewise.
you're watching or listening, you know that Bill, there's a lot of wisdom there, and you've done a great job in building your business and building your life. And I just appreciate you. I appreciate so much. And so thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing you and your experience. And
Thank you, Vicky.
yeah, thank you. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Bill. I know I certainly enjoyed that conversation, and I just thought it was rich and full of really great wisdom and learning in building and growing a contracting business. And I hope that you will consider maybe sharing a story that you have about some learning and some opportunity that you had to grow in your business that would maybe help other people maybe not feel so alone and maybe have an opportunity to improve in how they run their contracting business. So if you do, feel free to reach out to me at Vicky@suitorbusinessbuilders.com. Leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow or subscribe below, and maybe even share it with a friend. Thanks again for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.